All right, welcome everyone. Jenna Sullivan here, and we are going to be covering desires and defiance in James chapter 4. So we are on session number 7. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. I hope you've been able to read back through James chapter 1 through 3 and clear through chapter 4. We're kind of barreling down the end here, and it's been really good for me. I hope it's been good for you. It's been eye-opening, and I've learned a lot. Okay, so James opens with another question in this chapter. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? Okay, so question. When's the last time you had an argument with someone? For me, it's like last night, how many times yesterday? And why I'm joking about this is because it's often with my husband or my son, right? I'm with them all the time. And it's often an issue of, I didn't get my way, or I had an expectation that they didn't meet. And it's interesting because, oftentimes we think of quarreling and fighting in a big sense, like aggression and yelling. But what about just those little mini arguments that you have? And is that okay? And what does that look like? What's interesting to me is I've done a lot of study in like personality traits, and there's so many different personality tests, but the thing that I can most easily remember is the colors. There's the red, yellow, blue, and green, and that breaks it down super simply. The best way to describe it would be that like yellows are people pleasers. So I kind of envision them like yellow Labrador retrievers, where they're just ready to please and they don't like, conflict. Whereas say a blue, they're head in the sky, right? Blue sky. They love the outdoors. They love people. They love to party. So whenever I think of a blue, they're just people. They love talking to people. They love being around people. And that's a blue. They just love it. They love partying and having fun. And talking, they talk a lot. So it's always good to be around a blue because they're never at a loss for words. Then you get into, say, a green, and a green is somebody who's very analytical and they love charts and graphs. A lot of teachers and nurses are greens. A lot of them are yellow though too, because they want to help people. But again, thinking in terms of just the kind of mathematicians of the world, the people who love the spreadsheets. And then you've got, and by the way, those tend to be more quiet and reserved. Then you've got reds, who are very outspoken, aggressive, kind of fiery, right? So green, we didn't kind of give an analogy for that, but it's like green grass, where they look at the tiniest blade of grass. So that's kind of how I think about them, looking at all the little details of everything. Whereas red is like fiery red. And they tend to be it's hard for me to say a natural leader. It's that they think they're a leader. So oftentimes like a red is just wanting to lead people because that's just who they are. They're little cruise directors. With kids, you can pick out these color personalities really quickly. The yellows are mommy's little helpers. The blues are the chatterboxes, always having to be in the conversations. The greens are the super quiet ones that are, the organizers. Everything is organized. They'll put their little matchbox cars in a big, nice, perfect row. And then you've got the reds, who are the little dictators. Like, they will make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they will tell you what to do too. So it's pretty funny to see these colors are pretty accurate with people. And what has helped me is just to learn to communicate, because what I found is a lot of miscommunication or arguments or disagreements or misunderstandings happen because of communication failures. And oddly enough, most women fall into some of the yellow categories, the yellow blue. And why I say most, not all, but most, is because women are naturally, we want to help people. Yellows love to help people. And also women tend to be non-confrontational. Again, that's a big, huge, we're not saying everyone, but some of them. So those of you who know me well, I'm actually pretty confrontational, and I'm a red, and I'm okay with confrontation. It doesn't bother me. I don't get emotional about it. Whereas a yellow can get like broken from it, and they don't want any part of it. So when I think about it, there's these landmines, and landmines tend to come in triggers. What triggers you? So a red can trigger a yellow pretty quickly, but the same is true the opposite way, because a yellow won't really tell you what they need to tell you, they'll beat around the bush because they don't want confrontation. Whereas the red is like, just tell me what you need to tell me and let's move on, right? So, and same with the other colors. There's the quiet ones, there's the introverts versus extroverts, and blues and yellows tend to be more extroverts, while the greens and the reds tend to be more introverts, oddly enough. Again, these are just generalities, but it's an interesting field of study, because when you get into thinking about conflicts and what triggers you and everything, when we go back to the Bible, not what like popular culture says about colors or enneagrams, like numbers and all of that, right? We got to take all of that out and look at what scripture talks about. When I think about triggers and I think biblically what that means, I think about landmines, but I think about they're really are idols, right? So when you step on a landmine, it explodes. And when I think about idols, and when somebody steps on one of my idols, I explode. And the same happens if I step on somebody else's idol, they explode. So oftentimes arguments can be seen in one of two ways. Did I step on one of their idols, or did they step on one of mine? So recently, an old wound of mine was triggered just this week. And the person who said what she said didn't mean any harm by it at all. Like, I think she was trying to be helpful, but she triggered a landmine. She stepped on an idol of mine. And we'll get into a little bit about what an idol is in just a minute. But I reacted, with all of what we've been discussing. I didn't pause. It was almost as if like I couldn't see any different. It was like this old landmine of mine was stepped on, and it came out of nowhere. And by the way, Satan's really good at like kind of pulling up old idols. An idol is something that we put before God. We put something above God. I will say this is more important to me than God's will. So my will in this situation is more important than God's will. So if I'm working, and I think a lot of people think we put idols on a pedestal, and we think about idols are things that we worship. Idols can be something that's just simply not, it's something that is selfish to you, something that you want, desire over God's will. And you're going to put that first. And so we have to remember those demands. Like, my heart is a demanding heart. And if I'm demanding something that's not in line with God's will, but it's because it's going to please Jen, that's a kind of a good indication that it's probably an idol of mine. So with the whole thing that happened with this one woman, I immediately said I was sorry. But what was interesting is it took me several hours of prayer and actual discussion with my husband to figure out what happened, because it was such an old thing and it just flooded me. And I even told her I got triggered, and it was hard. I couldn't even really explain to her what happened, but it was an interesting thing, because I was just looking for, well, what's the heart of the matter? Where was my heart deceiving me? What happened there? And my heart is everything of who I am, right? So I figured out that it was pride. And as a kid, I was really gullible. I was pushed aside by pretty much everyone who mattered in my world. My voice didn't matter. I didn't matter. So as an adult, if somebody pushes me aside and basically it's kind of like they think they understand what I just said, so they move on and they kind of push me aside. It's kind of like, no, I need to be heard. You're not hearing me, because I was so abused as a child in this that now it's almost like the opposite. The pendulum has swung the other way. So it's like, you will hear what I have to say. But when I think about that doesn't do anything to further the gospel. It's not helpful. It's not God's will. That put me right in the seat of Jen's the driver at this point, So my idol was at war. My desires cause this conflict, right? When someone threatens my idol. So I'm curious what something is in your life that maybe causes frustration or friction when it's threatened. So just give you some examples of some, what I would call first world problems, like driving techniques, right? If somebody's driving and they drive poorly, I don't know, maybe you have an idol there, and you might not. I have to be careful about idol fishing. But driving techniques is interesting, because I have an interesting thing with my dad where he scared me growing up all the time. He was a race car driver, and I always felt like we were going to get into an accident, because he was just weaving in and out of traffic, and he was honking at people and yelling at people. And I mean, it was like a mess in the car all the time. And my husband is not that way. He's the opposite, very safe, very calm driver. And ladies, I'm going to encourage you on something. Don't ever have your husband do school drop off, because something changed in my husband. I had him do school drop off 1 year, and that caused him to be the most aggressive driver ever, because all of the people who were entitled, who would cut the line, who would just park and open their door in the red zone and block traffic. And I mean, it made him crazy. So now he's a little more aggressive when he drives, and it triggers me. He's not all the time, but every once in a while he gets frustrated, and I'm like, oh, right back to like when I was 5 years old in the car with my dad. And so I get really mad, like, cut it out. Like I just want to get out of the car, but it's an idol, and I have to figure out, okay, what's going on here, and how I'm trying to control the situation. There's so many different funny first world problems, and you all have them. Like for me, it's hot French fries. I mean, hot French fries, really? Who cares? But yeah, I paid for them. I want them to be hot. If they're cold, I'm going to return them. Not an idol, but what I'm saying is sometimes I've been really upset. I've gotten really mad at the person, and I thought, wow, if they knew I was a Christian, that would have given Christianity a black eye. There was no way I could witness to that server because I just yelled at them for the French fries. It's like, what in the world? I think about funny things like having peace in the bathroom. Can you just go to the bathroom in peace? Some of you deal with this all the time. I think about the carpool lane, right? And people who are driving in the carpool lane that shouldn't, or people who are driving too slow in the carpool lane, or the magic lane. You guys know about the magic lane, right? The magic lane is the lane that when you get into the freeway, the lane magically opens up for you and everybody gets out of your way. You know, this doesn't happen, but I think it should. But also for me, I feel like I sort of am entitled to a poop free shower. I mean, I think that's something I could ask for. I know you're probably like, what are you talking about? Our dog has recently been pooping in our shower. He's decided that's his new poop spot. I'm like, I guess it's better than the carpet, but it's like, you know, I walk into the shower and there's a nice fresh turd there for me. So I kind of feel like I'm entitled to a poop-free shower. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, what in the world? These are first world problems, because I should be happy that I have someone that's driving for me, because I don't like to drive. I should be happy that I can even have any money to go out to buy French fries, that I have money to have any food, right? I should be grateful that I even have a bathroom, that I don't have to go to the bathroom out in an outhouse or out in the field somewhere, right? That I have a home over my roof over my head, that I, you know, if I don't have peace in the bathroom, thank God I have a bathroom. You know, carpool lane, come on, really? Thank you for even having a car and to be able to get places. And thank you for having a shower and a dog, like, yay, great. And thank you for pooping there. You know, it's like all of these things. I'm just curious, as you start moving through your day, all the things that we kind of get upset about. You know, if you're upset, like I get upset that my husband didn't take that parking spot and he parked like 10 rows down. I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, thank you that I can walk. So when I think about how easy it is for us to forget how blessed we are, it reminds me of a story of this little blind kid who's sitting on the street corner, and he says, I'm blind, please help, on the sign. And people are giving him money here and there. And a man walks up to him and pulls a pen out of his pocket and grabs the sign from the kid and writes on the back of it, gives it back to the kid so it's facing that way, and he moves on with his day. At the end of the day, the man comes back and, how'd it go? And the kid says, what did you do? People have been putting money in like way more. It's just constant. What did you say on my sign? He said, I said basically the same thing. I just used different words. And he said, it says, it's a beautiful day outside, but I can't see it. And it's like when you change your perspective and you change the way you view your gratitude in your life, it will change these landmines. It will change your ability to not just like, really, I'm going to react about that? Okay, right? So that gratitude is going to crowd out your negativity. So when I think about, you know, my stuff and the things I want to ask for, and there are good things that we ask for, and I think about James 4:3, you know, you ask and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. Well, what does that look like? You know, I have desires that are seemingly good. Sometimes they're even biblical. Like I want my husband and my son saved. I want to spread the gospel to 1 million women. That's a goal of mine. I want to help encourage all of you to have a deeper relationship with Jesus. But when I think about if my desires turn into demands, right? And I think if my desires turn into demands, then the outcome is defiance in the form of an idol. My defiance says that my way is better than God's way. So the flip side of that is when my desires, right? When my desires are washed in deference to God's will, the outcome is divine sanction. Like, that's wild to think of. When my desires are washed in deference, like your will, not mine, that's deference to God's will. The outcome is divine sanction, which means blessing, right? My desires, when they're focused on God's will, God always, God's will is always blessed. Jen's will is not blessed. God's will is. So it said in verse 15 and 16, instead you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. And I think about that. I think about my own arrogance sometimes. Like, I know better. It says in verse 9 to be wretched and mourn and weep. It's kind of a confusing verse, right? Because it says, let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to gloom. And it's hard to understand that because it's in context. If you really understand it in context, he's not saying walk around being sad and gloomy. He's saying, let that worldly, arrogant laughter, that worldly joy, everything you think you know about the world. Remember, in context of chapter 3, you gotta humble yourself, man. Like, you gotta turn that worldly wisdom that you think you know into godly wisdom, and that will cause you to mourn, and that will cause you to be a little gloomy, because you will now have this humility, like really wrapped in gratitude. So I'm just going to leave you with this. The next time you have a quarrel or an argument, I want you to pause and consider 3 things. Number 1, what landmine of yours did they step on? Number 2, what landmine of theirs did you step on, right? Could be one or the other or both. Number 3, will this argument have eternal consequences? And if so, how can you align it with God's will? So I think about the story of the dog fight. We tend to have 2 dogs in our lives, right? You've got one dog that's a good dog that wants to do the good stuff. It's like you can put it as a white dog if you want. You've got the other dog that's just a bad dog that wants to do the bad things. It's thin, all of that, right? It's the flesh versus the spirit. And you can say black dog, white dog, maybe. And it's like, well, which dog's going to win? Which dog are you going to allow to win? And it comes down to which dog you're going to feed. If you're going to feed one dog over the other dog's going to starve. So I'm happy with letting the evil dog starve, right? I want to feed the good dog. So that means getting in the Bible, praying, really listening and learning what God has to say to you. So I hope that this has been encouraging for you. We will see you on the next one. We've got 3 more sessions to go. And I really do appreciate all of you and your time spent here with me on these mornings. All right, take care. Bye.